In my previous life, Elias Grant was just a poor scholar, yet he endured hardship to travel all the way to the capital to take the imperial exams. He brought along a marriage contract, ours. At the time, my father and older brother, Ethan Song, welcomed him with courtesy, treating him politely and offering food and shelter. But when it came to the topic of marriage, they tactfully avoided it. My mother, however, who loved me dearly, simply couldn't bear the thought of me marrying a man without status or wealth. Furious, she found a reason to punish him, forcing him to kneel under the freezing snow. The next morning, when I heard the news, I was filled with guilt. I brought medicine to his room, hoping to offer some comfort. But when I got there, I saw my younger half-sister, Yena Lao, tenderly applying ointment to his frostbitten skin. I quietly turned away and left. In the days that followed, I chose to care for him from the shadows. I gave him the best brushes and ink, sought out rare and valuable books to help his studies. What began as guilt slowly transformed into something deeper. I fell helplessly in love with this proud, resilient young man, but Elias, he was a man who clung to resentment. He remembered every offense, no matter how small, and never acknowledged the kindness shown to him. He saw my family's help as humiliation. My efforts, he believed, were nothing but pity. In his eyes, only Yena, my younger sister, was sincere in her care for him. Later, when he earned the top rank in the national exam, he petitioned the emperor to grant Yena the title of official secondary wife. On our wedding night, he never even came to lift my bridal veil. From that day on, he never once stepped foot into my chambers again. As his power grew, Elias became the highest-ranking court official. Then, with cold cruelty, he ordered my entire family into exile. I knelt before him, begging for mercy. He grabbed my chin and sneered at me with contempt. At that moment, my heart turned to ash. I pulled the hairpin from my head and drove it straight into my heart. As I fell, he seemed genuinely shocked. His hands trembled as he caught me. Then I opened my eyes again, and I was back, on the day Elias came to our home with the marriage contract. Panicked, I ran to the courtyard and found him there again, kneeling straight-backed in the snow. As I approached, he raised his head and looked at me with those same cold, proud eyes, that same gaze. Even in my past life, no matter how kind I was to him, Elias always looked at me that way. No matter how much time passed, his gaze remained cold. I stared directly into Elias Grant's eyes, then slowly lowered myself and spoke softly, "I'm sorry." He seemed momentarily stunned. Snow drifted gently between us, light as white petals in the wind. They say fate begins with something beautiful, but between Elias and me, from the very beginning, there was no such beauty, only snow, cold and indifferent. "I'm sorry my mother made you kneel," I said gently. "She only did it because she loves me too much. If it made you upset, I'll kneel too. It's only fair. After all, it's all my fault. I never looked down on you." That apology, in my past life, I had wanted to say it when I brought medicine to his room, but I held it in, and for the rest of my life, I never got another chance. Back then, I used to wonder, if I had walked through that door and apologized, if I had just been brave for once, maybe things wouldn't have ended the way they did. Maybe Elias and I could have had a different ending. Maybe the Song family wouldn't have been destroyed. But my second mistake was loving him too much. In this life, I will let him go, and in doing so, I will finally set myself free. With that thought, I looked at him and continued, "But we've never truly known each other, have we? And you've never liked girls like me. If we forced this marriage, we'd both suffer, so perhaps it's better if we end this now. Don't you think?" The young man kneeling in the snow slowly raised his head. His back remained straight, proud. His dark eyes met mine, calm, unwavering. "How do you know I don't like girls like you?" he asked. I was caught off guard. How could I not know? In my past life, it took me years to realize it. I always believed he hated me because of how my family had treated him, so I tried harder, tried to be kinder. I wanted to be the perfect wife. I went great distances to find doctors when he was ill. I spent my family's wealth to help him recruit talented officials to pave his way in politics. But in the end, he only said one thing: "Everyone in the Song family is a hypocrite, and you, Evelyn Song, are the worst of them all." I was the one he despised the most. I never once made him happy, only disgusted him. Even when my younger half-sister was pregnant, she came into my room smiling, claiming she resented how the Song family had treated me like a precious gem. Then she deliberately fell right there, in my chambers. Elias didn't even bother to investigate. He just slapped me across the face, and when bandits captured both me and her, demanding gold from Nanyang in exchange for our release, Elias only brought the ransom for one of us. He said, "Saving one lady is enough." That was all the proof I ever needed. He never loved me. In fact, he outright hated me. I snapped out of my thoughts and looked at the young man still kneeling in the snow. The white fox fur at the end of his sleeves fluttered gently. I reached out, brushing the snowflakes aside, and touched his face. He froze. His skin was icy beneath my fingertips. So this is how cold this snowstorm truly is. From the corner of my eye, I saw the hem of a soft pink dress hiding behind a pillar. It was my younger half-sister. Her mother had once been a maidservant in our house. She caught my father's eye one night and gave birth to her. Since we were little, she always tried to compete with me, but she never won, except for one thing, Elias Grant. He was the only thing she ever took from me. And maybe the fact that I stood in the way of their engagement was part of why Elias hated me so deeply. I brushed a thin layer of snow off his shoulder. Still, Elias stared straight at me, unyielding, as if waiting for my answer. I paused for a moment, then pointed toward the girl behind the pillar and smiled. You'll probably like her. He followed my gaze and frowned slightly. Who is she? She's my younger half-sister, I replied. Her name is Daisy Song. Beautiful name, isn't it? In my previous life, he even built an elegant estate and called it the Daisy Pavilion, just for her. I figured I should give them space this time. You don't need to kneel anymore, I said gently. I'll take responsibility and speak to my father and older brother about breaking off the engagement. You won't have to worry about your reputation. No one will make things difficult for you here. You can stay at the Song estate without concern, and with that, I turned to leave with my maid, but just as we were about to go, as I brushed past him, Elias suddenly reached out. His snow-covered hand gripped my wrist without warning. Snow clung to his dark robe. He lowered his head, voice hoarse. Only a first-ranked marquis, with vast lands and wealth, would be worthy of someone like Miss Evelyn Song, right? My maid, Mia, quickly stepped forward and pulled his hand away, furious. How dare you? Our lady is the daughter of the Duke of the South. All who proposed to her were noble sons of royal lineage. Even if you were a first-ranked marquis, you'd still be beneath her. In the Song family, I was always treated like a treasured jewel, so when Elias suddenly appeared to propose marriage, no one in my family welcomed him. My father, who could see promise in the young man's future, still warned me solemnly, Elias Grant is not a good man. He's endured too much hardship. His temperament is cold and harsh. If you marry him, Evelyn, you'll suffer. In my previous life, I didn't believe him. I insisted on marrying Elias anyway, and in the end, every word father said came true. I held Mia's hand gently, then looked Elias straight in the eye. No, I said quietly, and I walked away. The snow continued to fall. I didn't bother to explain further. I didn't need a first-ranked marquis. I didn't need endless lands or titles. All I ever wanted was someone who would cherish my heart, but that person was definitely not him. The snowfall wasn't even heavy. Yet by the time I reached my mother's courtyard, my shoulders and hair were dusted with a thin layer of white. Mother rushed over in worry. Nanny, get her out of those wet clothes. Change her into something warm, now. Then she pulled me close and pushed a cup of warm milk into my hands. Are you cold, my darling? The snow's getting heavier. Why didn't you ask the maid to bring an umbrella? What if you catch a chill? Hearing her soft, loving voice made my heart ache. I bit my lip. I'm not cold, Mother. But the moment I spoke, a lump formed in my throat. A choked sob slipped out before I could stop it. I quickly brought the warm cup to my lips and took a sip, using the rising steam to mask the tears welling in my eyes. Right now, I was still the precious jewel of the Song family. Even a few snowflakes on my shoulders made my mother worry, but I knew it was during another winter, a winter when I crossed 1,000 miles through the snow, risking my life to search for a renowned physician for Elias. Man and horse lost all sense of direction, and I nearly froze to death in the snow. That winter, there was no one left to ask me, Evelyn, are you cold? Now, Mother reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. Her voice was soft and calm. That betrothal agreement from the Grant family, it doesn't have to be honored. I'll speak to your father about it. We'll find a way to resolve it properly. The engagement between Elias Grant and me had been arranged by our ancestors, but the Grant family had fallen from grace, leaving Elias alone, with no family or fortune. If the Song family were to cancel the engagement now, we would be branded as shallow and materialistic, as the kind who only valued wealth and power, and it would ruin the spotless reputation my father had spent his whole life building. Evelyn, Mother said gently, I only hope you'll find a husband who truly suits you, someone who will keep you safe and let you live a peaceful, happy life. I reached out and held her hand. Warmth spread through me. Tears welled in my eyes, but I smiled faintly. I don't need a perfect husband. I don't even wish for peace or comfort. I only want the Song family to be safe, to be spared from the heartbreak and tragedy of my last life. Earlier today, I had already spoken to Elias. I had let him go. Perhaps this time around, my family would no longer suffer because of me, but somehow, it still didn't feel like enough. The thought struck me, and I turned to my mother. Today is the winter solstice. My brother Ethan left the city to train the troops for Elias's sake. Mother, I'd like to visit him. Could you have the kitchen prepare some rice dumplings? Ethan hasn't been in good spirits lately. I want to check on him. It was also the winter solstice when Elias came to our home. In my past life, something terrible happened that day. Prince Lucas, the emperor's own younger brother, had been ordered to leave the capital, but on his journey, he was ambushed. Though he survived, he lost the use of one leg, and my brother Ethan, when he heard what had happened, rushed out to help with no time to prepare. He was gravely injured during the rescue, and later developed a lingering illness that chained him to his sickbed for the rest of his life. Mother looked out the window at the gray sky, her brows drawing into a worried frown. The cold was biting. I tried my best to act spoiled and plead sweetly with Mother. Eventually, she gave a soft nod of approval. Without delay, I stood up and headed out. It was already past noon. I remember the sky had just begun to dim at that time. My brother had been brought back, covered in blood. I couldn't afford to be late, so instead of riding in a carriage, I mounted a horse directly. I sent my most trusted guard ahead to inform Ethan at the military camp. As for me, I had to catch up with Lucas Yen first. I owed him a life. This time, I would repay that debt. The northern wind howled in my ears, as I urged my horse forward, racing past the capital, and out through the city gates, toward the 10-mile pavilion. The wind was freezing, piercing my chest like icy blades, making me shiver uncontrollably, but I only whipped my horse harder, faster. In my past life, after the emperor died of a sudden illness, his successor was just a 3-year-old boy. It was Lucas Yen who was granted the title of Regent Prince, alongside Elias Grant, to stabilize the court, but the two were like oil and water, sworn political enemies. Their rivalry was legendary. Lucas, despite having a limp and a cold, expressionless face, still commanded immense respect. No one dared treat him with disdain. It was he, not Elias, who shot an arrow and killed the enemy. When Tong Don and I were captured, while Elias brought nothing but gold to ransom Tong Don, Lucas chose action, and saved my life. I have always been clear in matters of gratitude and vengeance. But before I could repay him in that life, I was already dead. Now that I've been granted another chance, I'll repay him properly, with 2 sound legs. I hope this time, he'll keep his honor intact, and no one will dare mock him as a cripple again. The cold wind felt like knives slicing my skin. Winter had come early this year. Beyond the city walls, the roads were deserted, the sky was overcast, and heavy black clouds loomed over a vast blanket of snow. I pressed on, urging my horse faster. My body was weak, even licking my lips, I could taste the faint tang of blood, but I didn't stop, and finally, I saw it. The 10-mile pavilion stood ahead. A few soldiers were resting inside. I let out a small breath of relief. Just beyond this pavilion was where the enemy lay in ambush. In the roaring wind, my cloak billowed wildly behind me. The silver hairpin in my hair jingled softly as I dismounted my horse. In front of the pavilion, someone was already standing, leaning casually against a pillar, watching me. He wore a deep purple robe, a jade pendant hanging from his belt. Etched into the pendant was a single character, Yen. His long hair was tied high, though a few loose strands danced around his ears in the wind. Lucas Yen. He had striking, refined features. Thick eyebrows brushing his temples, narrow, proud eyes glinting with a trace of arrogance. His nose was straight, his lips thin, and the overall impression he gave off was effortlessly bold. Charismatic, the type of youthful elegance that no winter cold could dim. I froze for a moment. In my memories, Lucas Yen always wore a gloomy expression. His methods were ruthless. That was the man I remembered. But so this was what he had once been, before the injury to his leg. Back then, he had been a proud, unruly young noble. One of his guards, noticing a young lady appear in such a desolate place, looked surprised. He turned to Lucas and joked with a grin. Even outside the capital, our young prince still has noble ladies chasing after him. Lucas lifted his chin slightly, his narrow eyes curving with amusement, the corner of his lips tugging up in a faint, unreadable smile. He looked at me like I was a passing curiosity, playful, almost mocking. I turned away, quickly grabbed a food box from behind Snowhoof, walked forward a few steps, delicately lowered my veil, and tried to sound shy and soft. Today is the winter solstice. Your Grace likely hasn't had any rice dumplings yet, so I brought you some. As a small token of admiration, I stepped closer, presenting the food box, but my foot slipped on the snow. With a soft gasp, I stumbled toward him. He immediately reached out, gripping my arm to steady me, but didn't let me come any nearer. Lucas narrowed his eyes, his voice low and clipped. A proper lady should know how to respect herself. His gaze was cold. He shot a warning look at his men. They instantly turned away, no longer watching. Seizing that moment, I whispered quickly under my breath, "There's poison. There's a traitor. There's an ambush." Lucas Yen was a skilled commander in both strategy and combat, yet in my past life, he ended up crippled, first struck by a fatal blow from behind in an act of betrayal, then poisoned. The poison hadn't killed him, but it had cost him everything. The poison wasn't deadly, but once someone tried to circulate their inner energy, it would flare up and attack the meridians. In my past life, I had uncovered all of this while helping Elias Grant. I even knew the antidote formula from the beginning, but this time I was giving that antidote to Lucas Yen. His gaze darkened. He raised my chin with a hand. A sharp, slender blade gleamed beneath the sleeve of his robe, its edge just barely concealed, as if ready to slice across my throat at any moment. But I held his eyes, unwavering. Calmly, I said, "I'm the daughter of Chancellor Song, Your Grace. If you truly think so little of me, at the very least, won't you try a rice dumpling I personally prepared? After that, I promise, I'll give up this silly admiration for you." I opened the food box. The sweet aroma wafted into the cold air. I picked up a soft white dumpling and ate it myself. See? No poison. I was betting that he would believe me, because my father was Ethan Song, Chancellor of the Empire. Lucas stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, he chuckled. He reached out and took the box from my hands. His guards immediately stepped forward to stop him, but he waved them off. "She's just a little noble girl," he said lazily, hardly a threat, though he looked reluctant at first. After tasting the first dumpling, his eyebrows lifted slightly, just a bit surprised. I'd always been good at cooking. Lucas lowered his head and ate with quiet elegance, a far cry from the cold-blooded prince I remembered from the last life. I rested my chin in one hand, watching him. "You know," I teased, "since your grace has eaten my dumplings, surely you must feel something for me by now." Before I could even finish my sentence, Lucas nearly choked. He looked up at me in alarm, a rare crack showing in his usually stern face. "Shut up," he muttered. Even his guards couldn't help but laugh. Once he was finished, I took the empty box back. I had already sent word ahead. My brother was on his way to this danger zone, and I had hidden the antidote inside the dumpling filling. Lucas would be safe. The snow began to fall again. My body trembled from the cold, but when I climbed back onto Snowhoof, I felt lighter. Just as I turned to ride away, just as I was about to leave, a voice called out from behind me. I turned. Lucas Yen stood under the pavilion, his eyes dark and unreadable as he asked, "What's your name?" A quiet relief washed over me. I smiled. "Evelyn." Evelyn Song. That day, something major happened in the capital. Lucas had left the city on royal duty, but nearly fell into an ambush outside the walls. Luckily, my brother, Ethan Song, had received secret intelligence in time. He led his men out and rescued Lucas before any harm was done. The emperor was furious when he learned of the attack, ordering a full investigation into who was behind it. To calm Lucas's nerves and reward our family, His Majesty personally sent gifts to the House of Song. When I returned home, Ethan was furious. "You're just a girl, and you dared ride out of the city alone?" he snapped. "Do you have any idea how dangerous that was?" I clung to his sleeve, apologizing over and over, begging for forgiveness. He snorted and looked away, his anger slowly melting. "Fine," he grumbled. "But how did you even know there would be an ambush at 10 Mile Pavilion?" I lowered my eyes. "I didn't. I just had a dream." In that dream, I had seen him, my brother, lying in a pool of blood. That's right. If I hadn't come back to life and changed the course of events, Ethan would have been gravely wounded by now, his body barely making it back to the capital. Even the imperial physician in my last life had advised us to start preparing for his funeral. But now, he was here, healthy, safe, and bickering like always. He reached out and flicked me lightly on the forehead. "You little idiot," he said, laughing. "I'm perfectly fine." Maybe he didn't believe me, maybe he did, but he didn't ask any more questions. Instead, he changed the subject to Lucas Yen. As the emperor's only younger brother, Lucas was often referred to as the young prince. I had never seen Ethan admire anyone the way he admired Lucas. And Ethan, he was always proud, always aloof. But when it came to Lucas, he couldn't stop praising him. I listened, growing more and more annoyed. Just then, a servant rushed in with news. "Your Grace, the young prince has come to express his thanks." Ethan lit up like a lantern. He forgot all about me and hurried straight to the main hall. Seizing the opportunity, I slipped away to my room and fell into a deep, peaceful nap. When I awoke, I remembered, the plum blossoms must be blooming by now. I called for Xiao Mian, and together we set off to pick a few sprigs. On the way there, I ran into Vanessa Song, and Lucas Yen was with her. Vanessa was holding 2 plum branches, and for some reason, she suddenly slipped, stumbling forward toward Lucas, but he simply stepped aside, calmly, effortlessly, letting her fall straight to the ground. I turned to leave. I really didn't want to be part of this awkward scene. But the young prince, Lucas, called out behind me. His brows were furrowed, his voice flat and filled with impatience, with a cold smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Aren't noble ladies supposed to know how to walk properly? At first, Vanessa looked at him with teary eyes, hopeful, but after hearing those words, her face went pale with embarrassment. She couldn't even get a word out. He had just treated her like a common servant, and worse, he'd said it in front of me. Prince Lucas was never one to dote on women. His words could be sharp, vicious, even. I wasn't offended, though. With a bored expression, I said lazily, well, the girls in our household tend to get weak in the knees whenever they see a young, handsome man. Not entirely their fault if they trip, is it? Lucas turned to stare at me, stunned. He clearly hadn't expected me to clap back so casually. After a beat, he let out a dry, mocking chuckle, and turned away without another word. Xiao Mian helped Vanessa to her feet. As she passed me, I couldn't resist stopping her. I turned and asked softly, didn't you say you had feelings for Elias Grant? Her body stiffened, her face flushed red with shame. He saved me once. That's all. I wouldn't dare hope for anything more. I looked into her watery eyes, and nearly burst out laughing. In a few short years, once Elias became a renowned general, this girl would kneel before her parents, weeping and pleading to marry him, claiming it was just a coincidence when he rescued her, but she had secretly loved him ever since. Now, flustered and humiliated, Vanessa left. Only Lucas and I remained. I still couldn't figure out why he was even here. With a slight lift of his chin, he looked down at me and asked, that day at 10 Mile Pavilion, setting aside where you got your information, why did a noble young lady like yourself leave the city alone on horseback? His eyes narrowed slightly, his gaze cold and dangerous. That look reminded me of the High Prince from my previous life, calculating, ominous. I thought carefully, then decided it was best to give the simplest, safest answer. To be continued. I smiled sweetly and replied, I already told you, I just admire you, your highness. When you were in danger, of course I had to come help. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, I added, by the way, did you enjoy the sweet rice dumplings that day? I sounded sincere, even gentle, but Lucas Yen's brows twitched slightly, his expression tightening with subtle discomfort. He looked at me coldly, and uttered just 2 words. Terrible timing. Then, as if afraid I might start believing in some romantic illusion, he added dryly, I'm extremely particular, you'd best give up now. Seeing that he didn't press me further, I let out a quiet breath of relief, but just then, I heard him mutter something else, soft, almost hesitant, thank you. Surprised, I looked up, but Lucas merely smirked, his voice turning sharp again. Still, don't misunderstand, I have absolutely no feelings for you. I bit back a laugh and nodded, but my smile faded in an instant, because just a few steps ahead, Elias Grant was standing there. He looked straight at me, his gaze was colder than snow, and when he smiled, it carried a sharp bite of sarcasm. You said you weren't interested in me, he said softly, but I guess you only like men with power and status. Before I could react, Lucas's voice cut in from behind, who are you? Elias didn't flinch, he looked directly past me, eyes steady, and said clearly, I'm Evelyn's fiancé. The moment the words landed, Lucas turned to me, his face darkened, his long eyes narrowing with a look that was half amusement, half fury. Well done, Evelyn. When he said my name, it was clear he was gritting his teeth. Then he locked eyes with Elias. The air around us grew tense in an instant. Lucas scoffed coldly, threw me one last glance, and turned on his heel to leave. His posture proud and upright, as if marching off to war. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. Elias was still standing there, and somehow his presence made things even more irritating. Then he spoke again, his voice filled with restrained frustration. The engagement hasn't been called off yet. That still makes you the future wife of House Grant. You should watch what you say and do. I nearly laughed. That engagement again, as if, so women should be held accountable, but men shouldn't. What about what happened between you and Don Song? Didn't that happen after our engagement had already been set? It was freezing cold, yet Elias was still wearing that thin, worn-out shirt, the sleeves already frayed at the edges. Still, he stood there tall and composed. He looked poor, yes, but somehow still dignified. I frowned and asked, did the Song family not give you a cloak? He answered calmly, I'm only staying with the Song family. I'm not there to beg for charity. Even if my clothes fall to pieces, I won't accept handouts. My jaw clenched tight, a flood of old memories crashed into my chest. I stepped forward and shoved him hard, still pretending to be noble. Really? Who has the time to insult your fragile pride? I spat. You think you're that important? Would you only feel respected if Dawn Song personally sewed you a cloak and handed it over herself? I didn't give him time to respond. The Song family never treated you badly, not once. I paused, then added. Quieter but sharper, Elias, dignity isn't something others give you. It's something you uphold yourself. If accepting help from others makes you feel unworthy, then fine, just think of it as a debt you owe the Song family. While I pushed him, scolded him, he didn't push back, didn't even flinch. Instead, he reached up, took my hand, the one I'd just shoved him with, and gently pressed it to his chest. He looked down at me with soft eyes and asked quietly, Evelyn, do you really hate me that much? I looked up and replied, no. I don't hate you. I despise you. I despise how deeply I once loved you, only for that love to be buried beneath cold, merciless snow. Then, out of nowhere, Elias began explaining, I never accepted anything from Dawn Song. There was nothing between us, she's not my type. Evelyn, he said my name so seriously that I looked up, stunned. But I pulled my hand back, shaking my head, that doesn't matter anymore, we're canceling the engagement either way. Elias took a half step back, the contrast between us had never felt more stark. I was wrapped in a thick white fox fur cloak, while he was still wearing that same thin, tattered shirt. His shirt was old and worn out, threadbare to the point of sorrow. The difference between us. It was painfully obvious, so obvious it stung. He let out a dry chuckle, like he was embracing the humiliation. Every word he spoke weighed heavy, as if each syllable carried 1,000 pounds. So, he said, the engagement is finally over. My mother personally handed me the engagement contract. That fragile slip of paper had yellowed slightly with age, but it had clearly been carefully preserved. They say when Elias came to the capital, penniless and desperate, he always kept that paper close, like it was something precious. I held it for a long time, turning it over in my hands. Then I told Mian, go heat up the brazier. Without hesitation, I tossed the engagement paper into the flames. It crackled, curled, and slowly turned to ash. If I felt anything, I didn't show it. Mian, on the other hand, looked more relieved than I did. To her, I was everything a young lady should be, smart, gentle, beautiful, and Elias? He wasn't even close to worthy. Then she suddenly blurted out, surprised, Mississippi, are you crying? I instinctively reached up to touch my cheek, and yes, a tear had slipped down without me realizing. I smiled faintly and said, it's the smoke. Too much smoke in here. She quickly stepped away from the brazier. When she returned, she looked at me intently, then confessed, Mississippi. I don't know why, but ever since I first saw that young master from the Grant family, I've disliked him. Even the way he agreed to cancel the engagement. It felt off. Like he had some kind of grudge against us from a past life. He seems like the kind of person, if he doesn't like someone, he'll make sure that person never has peace. I listened quietly, smiling faintly, but inside I felt a strange emptiness. How could I not hate him, and yet? The Elias standing here in this lifetime, he hasn't actually done anything wrong, so all these tangled, bitter feelings, I can only swallow them down. Now that the engagement is over, all ties are severed. This was the cleanest break I could hope for. Mian, sensing the mood shift, quickly changed the subject. But honestly, miss, she said brightly, I think the young prince is really nice. I bet there are dozens of girls lining up to marry him all the way from here to the capital. I rolled my eyes in mock shock. Oh really? So you've been keeping up with the marriage gossip now? Don't tell me you want to get married, Mian? Hearing that, Mian instantly blushed and turned away, refusing to even look at me anymore, but rumors still swirled around the cancellation of the engagement. Whether they knew the truth or not, people condemned the Song family for being heartless. To show our sincerity, my father prepared a generous compensation, extravagant gifts, promises of future benefits, but Elias Grant stood tall and proud, refusing to take a single coin. He even requested to leave the estate immediately. Before he left, I met him once. I asked, where are you going? I expected him to be cold or distant, maybe bitter, but to my surprise, he simply said, an old friend of your father offered me his vacant house. I'll be staying there for a while. I nodded. I didn't know what else to say. Then, out of nowhere, he asked quietly, where's the engagement contract? I smiled slightly. I burned it. The corner of his lips curled into a sneer, a bitter, mocking smile. Suddenly, I wanted to ask something else, so I called his name, Elias. It might have been the first time I ever said his name directly like that. He seemed a little surprised. If one day, I asked, you marry the woman you love, and she loves you back, on your wedding night, will you lift her red bridal veil yourself? The question sounded strange, maybe even silly, but the answer was so simple. Elias replied without hesitation, of course. My hand, which had been clenched tightly in my sleeve, slowly relaxed. Just one word, of course. So firm. So clear, it felt like I'd finally been freed. In my past life, I was so happy on our wedding night, and yet, no one lifted the veil for me, no one uncovered my face. Now I finally understood why, straight from his own mouth. It was never because he didn't care, it was because I wasn't the one he loved. I pulled a small pouch of silver coins from my sleeve, grabbed his hand, and placed the money into it. It wasn't out of pity. I was just worried for him. In this capital city, money flows like water, and if he ever suffered, people would say it was the Song family's fault. I told him, take it, this is my personal savings. You don't have to pay me back. Because what you owe me is far too much, so much. You could never repay it. Elias stood there, stunned, maybe even confused by his own feelings. What exactly do I owe you? Elias asked, his gaze falling to the pale pink coin pouch I had placed in his hand, a simple, unremarkable thing. I called his name again, softly, Elias. The silver hairpin in my hair trembled in the winter breeze. I lowered my voice, other than me, there's no one who truly believes in you, no one who sees what you're capable of, no one who believes you could one day rise to greatness. I continued, I didn't break off the engagement because I looked down on you, I did it because I once made a terrible mistake, and I couldn't let it happen again. It hurt too much the first time. Elias's eyes widened slightly, the wind swept snow past his temples. He had always been confident in his abilities, but in that moment, for the first time, I saw uncertainty, even fear, on his face. He reached out his hand, as if to touch me, but I stepped back, just half a step. Then I bowed slightly and said, I wish you wings to soar, a beautiful woman by your side, a life full of glory and wealth. Just know, none of it will have anything to do with me anymore. That winter felt colder than any before, but staying cooped up in the Song residence grew tiring, so as soon as the weather warmed even slightly, I took Mian out with me. At a jewelry shop in the East District, I ran into two women I would have preferred not to see. Vanessa Lau and Yena Lau, the daughters of the Assistant Minister of Rights. We had never gotten along. Every time I met them, discomfort followed, and today was no different. Whatever I chose to look at, they just had to choose the same thing, almost out of spite. So I decided to pick everything first, smiling slightly as their expressions grew darker and darker. Seeing my calm demeanor, Yena finally lost her temper and sneered, Evelyn Song, I thought you were too ashamed to ever show your face again. I raised a brow, oh? She smirked and added, everyone in the capital knows you just cancelled your engagement with the Grant family, because they fell on hard times, right? Such a heartless thing to do. Aren't you even a little ashamed? Your reputation was bad to begin with, now? No family would ever marry into yours. At that moment, I was admiring a delicate glass crown, so exquisite it looked like it didn't belong in this world. Without even looking at her, I replied coolly, maybe you should worry more about your own marriage prospects than mine. Before I could say anything else, I noticed both Vanessa and Yena's faces flush red. They awkwardly adjusted their dresses, expressions suddenly shy and embarrassed. I followed their gaze, and saw a man descending from the second floor, dressed in a regal violet robe, wearing a jade-encrusted hat. He was surrounded by an entourage of respectful attendants. He moved with calm, deliberate steps down the staircase. Lucas Yen. He gave a brief, indifferent reply to someone beside him. But his eyes flicked downward, and for a fleeting moment, our eyes met. Only, he looked right past me, as if I weren't even there. So that's why the Lau sisters had dressed so extravagantly today. They were waiting to impress the young prince. Yena took a step forward, clearly trying to catch his attention, but Lucas simply muttered, too loud. His cold, sharp gaze swept across the room. Even the boldest young women couldn't endure it. They quickly backed away, flustered, not satisfied. I decided to twist the knife a little deeper. Vanessa, Yena, I said cheerfully, aren't you going to take those pieces of jewelry you already picked out? I was still enjoying the sight of their disappointed faces, when Lucas suddenly turned and gave me the same frosty treatment. He said bluntly, you too. I was caught off guard. I could only sigh and let out a long breath. Then, Lucas hesitated, so. You called off the engagement? he asked. I nodded. He looked as if he wanted to say more, but in the end, only muttered. And then, he almost smiled, just the slightest lift at the corner of his lips. The group trailing behind him began to whisper to one another, although their whispers were hardly quiet. Miss Song must truly care for His Highness. She even came to the pavilion to see him off, and now she's ended her engagement just for him. I was stunned. I couldn't stop myself from glancing at Lucas, only to see him lift his chin with obvious satisfaction. As he continued his descent from the stairs, when he passed by me, he suddenly paused. Looking down at me, he spoke slowly. If no one is willing to marry Miss Song, this prince might be open to the idea. In my past life, Lucas never married. People whispered that he preferred men. Now that I had lived to see this moment again, I never imagined he would say something like that. Surprised, I blurted out, "Are you serious, Your Highness?" Lucas gave a faint smile, the corner of his lips curving slightly. "Just kidding," he said. I was speechless. He then reached out, adjusted the hairpin in my hair with a casual touch, and added with a lazy tone, "Depends on my mood." I looked up at him. In his eyes was a fleeting gleam, like a shooting star slicing through the darkness of the night. He turned and walked out. Snow had begun to fall again, fine, fluttering flakes melting into his black cloak. In that hazy moment, a memory came rushing back. That winter, the time when Tong Don and I were captured by the enemy. Snow fell just like this. Elias Grant, the man who loved me, brought 5 whole chests of silver and gold, but only to ransom her. When the enemy realized they couldn't profit from me, they grew furious. They dragged me to a hilltop, intending to behead me on the spot. That was when the crippled prince I used to mock, the one everyone called the lame prince, suddenly appeared. He raised his bow and shot our captors dead, saving my life. Though he was born noble, handsome beyond words, and held great power, in our past life, he'd been left permanently disabled. Back then, when he saw me, my body soaked in blood, trembling so badly I could barely stand, he took off his cloak and, despite the pain, walked through the snowstorm step by step. Wind and snow clung to him like frost, but still, he draped that warm cloak over my shoulders. My heart, long frozen and numb, suddenly stirred. Things I had buried deep within me, things I couldn't name, rose sharply to the surface. And now, Lucas was already outside, but strangely, he turned around and looked back. His gaze, dark, deep, and endless, was exactly like the look in the regent prince's eyes. From my memories, a few strands of hair fluttered in the wind. Then, with a faint smirk, he said lazily, "Evelyn Song, stop staring at me." When I returned home to the mansion, a large delivery awaited me, jewelry from the Jade Pavilion. At the top of the box sat a dazzling, radiant glass crown. A slip of paper lay beneath it, bold, confident handwriting. Just 2 words, Lucas Yen. When I looked at the glass crown, I realized I didn't really want it because I liked the way it looked. It was because, in my past life, after Elias returned from his southern campaign, he had brought back a crown just like this. But in the end, he gave it to Tong Don. At the time, I felt a bitter ache and a fierce, helpless jealousy. We were talking about Vanessa's future marriage. According to Mother, after I broke off my own engagement, it wouldn't be proper to arrange a new match right away. But Vanessa was around my age, and it was time she found someone suitable. In our previous life, it was the same. Mother had worried endlessly about finding a good husband for her. But in the end, Elias Grant personally requested the Emperor's decree to have Vanessa marry into the Grant family as his secondary wife. What a joke, a noble woman of our status made into a concubine. It was the laughingstock of the capital. I gently reminded Mother, perhaps it's best to let Vanessa choose for herself, that way she won't resent us in the future. Mother paused for a moment, then nodded. You're right. As I stepped out of her room, I happened to run into Vanessa. In my past life, I hated her, to the bone, but now, I felt nothing but a distant coldness. Watching her excitedly discussing suitors, I couldn't help but ask, "You aren't in contact with Elias anymore?" Vanessa gave me a puzzled look, then smirked slightly. "He and I? There was never anything between us." I stared at her for a long time, and gradually, I understood. In my past life, Elias never saw through my love for him, but this half-sister of mine, she did. She saw it clearly. That's why she tried to win him over, to compete with me. In this life, I had let go. I ended the engagement without a second thought, and now, in Vanessa's eyes, Elias was no longer anything special either. From soulmates to strangers, just like that. I let out a small laugh. So this was the root of all my pain, my own love. Suddenly, a harsh cough hit me. I bent forward, unable to breathe properly. That night, I came down with a fever. Ethan, my older brother, hurriedly took my personal token, and rushed off to summon the imperial physician. After examining me, the doctor simply said it was a cold, a bit of rest and I'd recover. But in truth, I remained ill the entire winter. Only when spring arrived did I finally feel better. During those days, I dreamed a lot, vivid, scattered dreams, fragmented and confusing. Even after I recovered, I had the nagging sense that I had forgotten something, but no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't figure out what it was. One night, in a haze between sleep and waking, I saw a figure standing beside my bed. They didn't speak, just quietly pressed a warm pill to my lips. As soon as it entered my mouth, it melted and filled me with warmth. Warmth spread through my body, flowing gently through my veins. That person reached out, as if to touch my face. But the moment I stirred slightly, he quickly pulled his hand back. He seemed to say something angry, but I couldn't make out the words. When I woke up, there was a spring blossom resting on the bedstand, still kissed with morning dew. As Mia helped brush my hair, she gently pinned in a hair ornament, the very same hairpin Lucas Yen had once given me. Suddenly, I had the urge to go to Hanshan Temple outside the city, to offer prayers and give thanks. Mother was overjoyed. She said my recovery must have been thanks to the Buddha's blessing. Somewhere deep inside, I could feel that many things had gone wrong, but when I opened my eyes, I was still the beloved daughter of the Song family. All those hazy, disturbing images from my dreams, I didn't want to dig deeper. Whatever they were best left forgotten. After all, a trip to the temple for peace and blessings was always a good thing. The carriage rumbled down a road, paved with green stone, the wooden nameplate of House Song swaying gently at the side. Suddenly, the coachman pulled the reins. Mia lifted the curtain and frowned. It's the young master from the Grant family, Elias Grant. I remembered, we had broken off the engagement, not long ago, but anything beyond that felt like smoke and fog, slipping through my memory. I couldn't recall the details. I furrowed my brow slightly. The air outside was overcast and damp, the sky full of mist that blocked the sun. Elias stood in front of the carriage, dressed in a blue robe. His face was thin, pale, and his dark eyes held a stubborn gleam. He looked like a man possessed, lost in his own world. I was never the type to hold back. Scowling, I barked, "You dare block my carriage? Are you not afraid of dying?" Elias replied softly, "I heard you were sick all winter, but the guards at your estate wouldn't let me in. I had no choice but to wait outside." I blinked, surprised. "What do you want from me?" But he didn't answer. He simply said, "I had dreams, not many, but strange enough. At first, I thought they were just foolish dreams, but in the end, I had to come and ask you. Just once." He lifted his head slightly, his posture once proud, now beginning to bend. There was a vulnerability in his face I had never seen before. Then he said quietly, "This winter, someone was supposed to bring me a rare book. It was a rare, precious book," Elias said slowly. "There should have been the best ink, brushes, and paper on my desk. She prepared everything for me, because of my exam. I heard she even learned wood carving for a month, just because I liked seal stamps. In the end, she carved a little rabbit, and left it on my desk." He paused, his voice, low, almost trembling. Each word landed, like the tip of a blade, painful but sweet. As I listened, a strange familiarity stirred in my chest. Something about it all felt so close, but I couldn't remember. Frustration built inside me. I shook my head and said coldly, "There's no such thing as should have in this world. No one should give you their all. No one should dedicate themselves to you, just to have their heart trampled on." Then I asked suddenly, "And that little rabbit, where is it now?" His expression changed immediately, color drained from his face. He gasped, as though in pain. "In my dream I threw it away," he whispered. "I thought it was shameful." I let out a small, bitter laugh. "What kind of shame is that supposed to be? That person you speak of, she must have been so full of pride and love." "Elias, you should step aside. I have other matters to attend to." I added one more sentence, almost out of spite. When I saw his eyes turn red, a strange, cruel satisfaction rose within me. I didn't know why, but I smiled, mockingly. "You know what should have really means? It means you'll never get it again. Understand now, Elias?" He staggered back 2 steps, his face white as snow. Why did it all feel so familiar, like that moment when I once smiled, and wished him a bright future? A quiet dread crept into my chest, as if I knew that from now on, every breath he took would be wrapped in suffering. I didn't know why, maybe only the Buddha knew. Outside the city, the peach blossoms at Hanshan Temple had bloomed early. But the temple grounds were quiet, not many visitors. I knelt in the main hall, gazing up at the kind and gentle statue of the Buddha. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew I had forgotten something important. But at that moment, I felt peaceful, free from all concern. Maybe everything was simply destiny. as I pressed my palms together in prayer, I suddenly felt the hairpin in my hair shift slightly. When I opened my eyes, I saw that the tip of Lucas Yen's finger had just brushed against the tassel of my hairpin. He was standing there, his eyes cast downward. After just a month apart, he looked even more handsome than before. I was just about to speak when he raised a finger, motioning me to stay silent. Lucas Yen knelt down beside me, on the straw mat. I had heard that the young duke never believed in Buddha or gods, but looking at him now, his sincerity outshone even mine. When we both rose and stepped out of the prayer hall, he finally spoke, lazily, and reached out to pinch my cheek lightly. Your face is rounder than before, must be my medicine working wonders. Only then did it click. He was the person I saw, in my feverish dreams. I glared at him. Your medicine? You snuck into my bedroom, didn't you? Lucas gave a sheepish little hum, pulled his hand back fast, scratched his nose awkwardly, then tried to change the subject. What did you pray for? I replied, if I tell you, it won't come true. He raised an eyebrow, lips curling into a faint smirk. Lowering his gaze to me, he said with surprising confidence, if you tell me, Evelyn, it might be even more effective than praying to Buddha. I gave a flat "oh," then said slowly, I prayed that our dear young duke will soon find a good wife. Lucas froze, the tips of his ears turned red. He knew I was teasing him, but still, he responded calmly, and for just a moment, his eyes showed a rare hint of seriousness. Evelyn, you're that eager to get married off? Outside, a bird with a long tail chirped brightly, as it flitted across the garden. The peach blossoms scattered on the ground, forming a soft pink blanket over the stone path that led down the mountainside. I looked at Lucas's sharp brows and clear eyes, still trying to process what he just said, when suddenly, the wind howled. A sharp whistle tore through the air. Lucas yanked me into his arms without warning. I immediately smelled the faint scent of bamboo on his robes. Cool, clean. He stepped back, an arrow sliced right through the space I had just been standing in. I looked up. Lucas's expression had darkened. More arrows came raining down, followed by masked assassins, knives drawn, emerging from the shadows. Lucas turned, shielding me with his body. Lucas held me tightly against him, his deep voice murmuring by my ear, don't look. Just hold on to me. The sound of clashing steel echoed around us, the earth spinning in chaos. I couldn't see what was happening, only felt the sweat pooling in my palm, from the fear tightening in my chest. Was it Lucas's blood I smelled, or the assassin's? The metallic scent grew thicker. When I finally dared to lift my head again, the ground was littered with bodies. This sacred temple, once a place of peace, now soaked in blood. Lucas wrapped his arm tighter around my waist, guiding me deeper into Han Mountain Temple. We weaved through narrow passageways, triggered hidden mechanisms, and finally reached a concealed chamber. Only when he lit the oil lamp did he finally exhale in relief. Then I realized, his weight leaning on me was too heavy. Lucas looked pale, sweat dripping down his face. His lips had gone ashen, and when I looked down, I saw blood gushing from a wound in his abdomen, and even more dripping from his leg. He had been stabbed. I helped him sit down. He fumbled in his sleeve for some medicine, but his hands were trembling too much to manage it. Without a second thought, I tore a strip from the hem of my dress, and began bandaging his wounds. After I managed to stop the bleeding somewhat, he leaned against the wall, eyes closed, panting. The flickering light danced across his features. Lucas tilted his head slightly, his eyes still shut. Then, he spoke softly, Evelyn. I looked at him. Come a little closer. I thought he had something important to say, so I bent down, but before I could react, he suddenly sat up. And his lips brushed against my cheek, maybe even the corner of my mouth. I froze. He sank back again, grimacing from the pain, but a mischievous little smile tugged at his lips. There was a hint of triumph in it. Then he said, there's a small hidden path behind the temple that leads down the mountain. My men are waiting for you there. Take that path. It's safe. It was only then that I realized he wanted me to leave. I asked, and what about you? He simply replied, don't worry about me. But I pressed again, what about you, Lucas? He looked at me for a long moment, then let out a helpless sigh, but his eyes held nothing but warmth. I'll stay. Evelyn, he paused. I could sense he was holding something back. He didn't speak for a while. In the dim light, his face, though pale, still carried that captivating calm, and then, in a low, steady voice, he began to say, that day. At the pavilion by the 10-mile ridge, the ambush was clearly premeditated, Lucas said calmly. The royal court has launched a full-scale investigation, but the culprit is still nowhere to be found. Since then, I've become extremely cautious, with everything I use or consume. He paused for a moment, then added, except for that cup of wine, my breath caught, the one given by His Majesty and Consort Vanessa, right before I departed. That was the only thing we didn't test. His tone was steady, almost indifferent, and it was right after drinking it that I collapsed. The bandits who were captured later confessed, if they couldn't kill me, they were ordered to cripple me, shatter one of my legs, so I'd be nothing but a broken prince, because a man like that would never be allowed to ascend the throne. He chuckled bitterly. The emperor is growing weaker by the day, and the crown prince is still just a child. He spoke as if this life or death matter didn't involve him at all. I stared at him, heart pounding. Then he added, more softly, I'm waiting, Evelyn, waiting to find out whether it was Consort Vanessa who wanted me dead. Or my own brother. If it's the former, he gave a small, ironic smile, then at least there's still hope. But if it's the latter. Lucas didn't finish the sentence. He turned his head to look at me, his smile faint, but in it, I saw regret, then I fear. I won't be able to keep the promise I just made to you. His voice dropped lower, won't be able to fulfill the wish you just whispered. He lifted a trembling hand, and gently adjusted the hairpin in my hair, then he muttered, ugly thing. Next time, wear a prettier one. I grabbed his hand, warm and still full of life, looking straight into his eyes. I said seriously, then I'll stay here and wait with you. That day, Lucas and I hid in the secret chamber, waiting for what felt like an eternity, until finally, the Emperor's personal guards arrived and rescued us. Everyone bowed deeply to Lucas, addressing him as, Little Prince. It was then I realized, he was not just any noble, he was the Emperor's beloved younger brother. The Emperor had always cared deeply for him, but that affection had made Consort Vanessa uneasy. She'd been plotting his downfall ever since. I turned to glance at Lucas again. There was no surprise on his face, but when he looked at me, his gaze had softened. He stared at me for a long time. Then, lifting his chin slightly, he said with quiet conviction, Evelyn, in our past life, we must have been fated. I don't remember it clearly, but in a hazy dream, I recall the silhouette of a prince. Limping, crippled, and yet walking with his back straight, proud and unyielding. I think, I once called out to him. He turned around, and his face. His eyes, so dark and bottomless like a deep abyss, suddenly flickered with a trace of hope, as if waiting for something, but I only gave a light chuckle, drawing out my words with teasing scorn, a crippled prince, huh? That snapped him out of his daze. Without knowing why, I suddenly asked, Lucas. What if I already belonged to someone else? What if I were married? He frowned, genuinely considering the possibility. Then, with a slightly playful tone, he answered, destroying 100 temples is still better than destroying a marriage. They say. Then, smirking a little, he added, well, I guess I'll destroy 100 temples, just to break your marriage. I laughed again, but this time my voice softened. And what if you really were crippled, if walking was difficult for you? His smile faded slowly, and something shadowed passed through his eyes. I pressed further, and what if I laughed at you, mocked you, called you a crippled prince, and looked down on you? Lucas was quiet for a moment, then he said in a low voice, then I would have lost all confidence. I wouldn't look at you the way I do now. I'd probably feel heartbroken, loving you but never daring to take even a step closer. That kind of pain. He looked away, might have been too much to bear. I didn't know why I kept asking those questions, as if somehow we had already lived it before. I whispered, thankfully. This is a new life, and in this life, most of those regrets no longer exist. Japanese castle meanwhile, back in the capital, two things had recently shaken the court. First, Crown Prince's mother, Consort Vanessa, had fallen gravely ill. Her chambers were locked down, and no one was allowed to visit. Rumors spread fast. Some said she had committed a terrible crime, others whispered that her life might already be forfeit, but nothing was confirmed, everything was speculation. Second, the top scholar of this year's imperial exams, Elias Grant, had stunned the court with his brilliance. The emperor was greatly pleased, and on that wave of favor, Elias submitted a petition. He wished to marry the eldest daughter of the Song family. He wished to marry me. As soon as the little prince heard this, his expression darkened. Not to be outdone, he too stepped forward, requesting the emperor to grant him marriage with the same woman, the Song family's eldest daughter. It caused an uproar in the capital. For weeks, every street and alley was filled with talk of this dramatic love triangle. People whispered endlessly, who would she choose, the honored scholar, or the mysterious little prince? In truth, after Elias had been promoted, he came to the Song Manor once. Even the gatekeepers, knowing he held the emperor's favor, no longer dared stop him. He looked even more haggard than before. I had once told him, I hope you have a bright future ahead. But now, seeing him like this, those words felt more like a curse than a blessing. He whispered hoarsely, voice heavy with regret, "The greatest regret of my life was marrying the woman I loved with all my heart. But on our wedding night, I never even lifted her bridal veil. I didn't see her face, not even once." That was the very first thing he said to me. His face had grown pale ever since that bitter winter illness, and as I looked into his haunted eyes, I felt like I had forgotten something important. But now, watching him in so much pain, I was confused. I truly didn't understand. "You got married?" I asked, startled. "When? I never heard any rumors about that." Elias widened his eyes in disbelief. His expression was blank with shock. Then, slowly, his lips trembled into a bitter smile. Tears welled up and spilled down his cheeks as he laughed softly, brokenly. "So it's really just me. I'm the only one who remembers this pain, the only one who carries it. Where am I supposed to find forgiveness?" He asked no one in particular. Who can forgive me? There is no pain more agonizing than realizing your deepest regret and heartbreak mean nothing to anyone else, that no one even remembers, no one left to fetch him medicine across 1,000 miles, no one to light a lantern for him in the dead of night, no one waiting at a lonely crossroads anymore. The world already has too few people who love deeply and selflessly, and now, he had lost the only one who ever did. Tong Thursday, Evelyn, was gone, and there would never be another. Who could fill that space in his heart? This man, who once held his head high with unwavering pride, now stood with his back hunched, shoulders trembling. A scholar, a man of honor, reputation meant everything, and yet, a single tear slipped from his eye. Not many tears, just one, but it carried the weight of unbearable sorrow. I still couldn't understand what he meant. He muttered in pain, lost in his own torment, and I could only offer a weak comfort. Maybe this was just a doomed fate. Maybe both of you were at fault." But Elias spat out a mouthful of blood, then let out a harsh, twisted laugh. "No, it was all my fault." His eyes, bloodshot and tormented, locked onto mine. There was something in them I couldn't read. I began to worry. His mind, his spirit, was unraveling, so I called over a few palace guards to escort him back. I stood quietly by the gate of the Song estate, watching him walk away, his figure fading slowly, down the long, empty street. Through the haze at the end of the street, a figure in a flowing violet robe appeared, riding a white horse. There were many people on the street that day, but to me, it was as if the world had faded away. My eyes saw only him, confident and proud. He rode with a calm dignity that even the soft spring breeze seemed to yield to. He looked every bit the noble prince he was, and as he drew closer, he reined in his horse right in front of the Song estate gate. Luke Yates sat tall in the saddle, sunlight glinting off his eyes, bright, unwavering, alive. In his hand, he held a brilliant golden scroll, a royal decree. He raised it high, the sunlight catching every shimmer of the silk ribbon. His gaze met mine, and in that moment, his eyes shone brighter than the sun itself. A warm, boyish smile spread across his face. "Evelyn Song," he said gently, "this life. You're going to marry me." I smiled back, the corners of my lips curving softly. "That's right," I replied, "so this life belongs to you, Your Highness." The past, with all its pain and regrets, was behind us now, and from this day forward, every moment would be a brand new beginning. If something feels off, let us know in the comments so we can make every story even better, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.